I think that it's a good point about having that ownership, the authorship versus accountability. Is if you're just dictating to people, then they have less agency or less I don't know, less of that desire to fulfill their own KPIs. Whereas when you have uh, when you're an author, when you're a part of you're one of the creators of the plan, then the roadmaps, the landmarks along the way, those metrics mean a whole lot more.
Yeah, it just allows them to bring true meaning to their work, whatever their work might be, if they have some say in what it is and the direction they're going. And, they're so much more bought in on whatever it is that the mission and the vision are if they're also active in the creation of that and the formation of that.
You've created quite a bit of success, wealth, businesses. You've created wealth for others, and it seems like you're pretty successful in your own family life. What are some of the hardest learned lessons, or maybe those mistakes or missteps you've made along the way? What were some of those pitfalls that were that stung the most?
I mentioned earlier that we could be our own worst enemy. I think, one of the things that I did quite frequently and actually became sort of like my inner voice, the way I talked to myself and the way that I would criticize myself in order to get more out of me, to get more perfection, more achievement, more success. Like that's been the thing that I've now later, in order to feel happy and fulfilled and proud of myself versus seeking external validation, because that was a big driver for me early on, was I needed to prove to the world that I was worthy and prove to myself and my family and my doubters and the bullies that I experienced growing up. I needed to prove them to all of them that I was successful. And so I chased a lot of things in order to prove to others that I was worthy. And the new chapter of my life is that I'm doing the things that make me proud, and I'm not trying to seek external validation anymore. And, a beautiful thing happens when you are doing things every day that make you proud of yourself, and they're the things that bring you joy. And the people around you tend to lean in more, and they're more proud of you. And so I've had to really battle that enemy that is myself. And yet I still kept feeling that similar hollow feeling. And so it's just really getting clear on like doing what makes you happy and lights you up. Sometimes we think we're not allowed to do that, and that it's kind of airy fairy, that would lead to us having some kind of business success. But whether your passion turns into something that's profitable or not is irrelevant. It's just you got to do the things you're passionate about, and be passionate about what you're doing if you want it to be truly fulfilling. And then you've got to really do it for yourself and nobody else. That's been a hard lesson. And so I've had to stop waging kind of war against myself and really check my inner critic and my inner voice. And when I started to do that, I really found more and more freedom. I'm still working on that. So, it's hard because I've had 47 years, or whenever my inner voice started criticizing me, 40 years, whatever it is, of behaving a certain way and getting the results that to the outside world looked successful, but on the inside, it didn't feel successful. So, that's been a real big gut check for me, and something that, having lost my father and recently my uncle, like, kind of forced me, knowing that I have only so much life left to live. Like, whose terms am I going to live the rest of my life by, and what's going to really make me feel happy at the end of my life? And I think my misstep was caring too much what other people thought and not caring enough about how I thought of myself.
That actually hits home pretty hard. Not to hijack your interview, but I after my injury as an EOD technician, military's bomb squad, and I lost my eyesight. I had a real chip on my shoulder. I had to prove to others of my own value because I thought I'd made a mistake, and I found out that there were a few active duty blind service members out there. And when they asked me in the hospital, where do you want to retire? I said, I don't. I'm going to stay on active duty. And I requested to become an instructor at the EOD school. Uh, it, it took about a year and a half of me climbing the wrong mountain. I just, at the same time, I was starting to learn about blind adaptive kayaking, mountaineering, running marathons, all that kind of stuff. And I realized as I was telling my own story and speaking across the country, I didn't have to prove to anyone else, or especially not myself, that I could still be an active duty service member. I didn't have to be a service member anymore to have value. And uh, I found a whole new path once I'd, yeah, uh, not let my ego get in the way. In fact, I think you mentioned how you control your own ego, or at least you try to, and not let your ego uh, make all the decisions for you. In fact, you use an analogy of the Terminator.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good research. Yeah, I at some point I had to name that part of myself that was so relentless and so driven that it would win at all costs, and not in an unethical way, but in a way where I would grind it out, and I would be hard on myself, and it would translate to being hard on others around me, which wasn't a good look for a leader. And so I had to really tame that part of myself. And this is sort of the next iteration of the Terminator now, is because that was the one that was out there just crushing it and thought I needed to do it for everyone else. And now I'm working on that one that just wants people to be proud of me, and realizes that was at the core of what the Terminator was really after. But yeah, sometimes I have to check in and just be like, okay, I have this killer side of me that wants to go crush everything that's in front of me and achieve and succeed. But sometimes I have to go more gently and softly and allow the game to come to me sometimes, and not always force everything, and to trust my intuition. And so oftentimes now I'm having an inner dialogue like, hey, Terminator, I appreciate that your power and strength is there, but I got this. Like, it's going to be okay. And I'm going to relax into it instead of tense my way through it. And so, yeah, it's been an ongoing thing. And Aaron, I just want to honor something that you said there in your story, is that, you did eventually have to take full responsibility and ownership of like the reasons that were driving you to stay in the military. And so, kudos to you for having the awareness and then taking full ownership, because I think anything that we want to transform or change in our life, it first just takes becoming aware of it and then fully owning it. And then we've got to just let it go and know that, like, trust in our spirit and the deepest part of our soul is going to know what should be next. And then we'd go on to the next thing. And I think to your point earlier in the conversation, like, we sometimes have to climb the wrong mountain to get the gut check and realize that we need to do the work to figure out which mountain to go climb.